The moment my sister pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand at my husband's funeral reception and whispered, "Read this when you are alone tonight. Do not let Margaret see you." I knew that the grief I had been carrying was only the beginning. The reception was held at the house, the same house my husband Gerald and I had shared for 38 years, on the edge of Orangeville, Ontario, where the fields behind our property stretched wide and flat in the way that makes the sky look impossibly large in October. Neighbors had brought casseroles and butter tarts. Someone had put on soft music I did not recognize. I moved through the rooms like a woman underwater, accepting condolences with a smile that felt borrowed from someone else's face. My sister-in-law Patricia stood near the kitchen doorway, speaking quietly with my daughter Margaret and her husband Darren. Patricia was Gerald's younger sister, 7 years his junior, a woman I had known for nearly 4 decades. We had never been close in the way some families are, but we had always been civil. She had Gerald's same deep-set eyes, and his habit of pressing her lips together before saying something difficult. She found me by the coat closet just as the last guests were pulling on their boots. She pressed the folded paper into my palm so naturally that no one would have noticed. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the kitchen where Margaret stood, then back to me. I closed my fingers around it without looking down. After everyone left, after Margaret washed the dishes with the kind of efficiency that suggested she was counting the china, after Darren walked the property once in the dark for reasons he did not explain, after they finally drove away in their leased SUV with promises to call in the morning, I sat down at Gerald's old chair by the window and unfolded the paper. The handwriting was Patricia's, small and slanted. Dorothy. Gerald came to me 2 months before he died. He was frightened. He asked me to hold something for him. I have been holding it ever since. I did not know when to give it to you. I think now is the time. Call me from a number they do not have. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the pocket of my cardigan, close to my ribs, and sat in the dark for a long time listening to the house settle around me. Gerald had been frightened. My husband, who had spent 40 years as a land surveyor and never once raised his voice, who kept his files alphabetized and his feelings private, who told me everything. I thought he had told me everything. I did not sleep that night. In the morning I drove to the library in town instead of calling from home. It seemed excessive, I knew. I was a 64-year-old retired schoolteacher, sitting in the parking lot of the Orangeville Public Library, looking for a payphone that no longer existed, before finally walking inside and asking to use the desk phone for a local call. The young librarian did not ask questions. Small-town courtesy. Patricia answered on the second ring. "I have been waiting," she said. "What is this about?" I said, because I could not bring myself to ask the question I actually meant, which was, what did my husband know that I did not? She exhaled slowly. "Not on the phone. Can you come to Barrie this week? Come alone. Do not tell Margaret you are coming." I did not ask why. Something in the way she said Margaret's name made me understand. I drove to Barrie on a Wednesday, telling no one. I told myself it was because I did not want to worry anyone. I understood, sitting in Patricia's living room with a cup of tea I could not taste, that the real reason was that I already suspected something, and suspicion, once spoken aloud, becomes something you are responsible for. Patricia sat across from me with her hands folded in her lap. "Gerald found documents," she said, "about a year ago. Something in the property records that did not match what he thought he owned. Our home sat on just over 4 acres, including the back field that Gerald had inherited from his parents decades before we married. It was not farmland in any productive sense, just open space that buffered the house from the road behind, and a small stand of old maple trees along the eastern edge. We had always assumed it was ours, simply and completely. "What kind of documents?" I said. "A company registered in Margaret's name. And Darren's." They had filed a development application for the backfield 18 months ago. Gerald found it through a registry search he was doing for a client. He recognized the legal description. Patricia looked at me steadily. He confronted Margaret. She told him it was a mistake, a clerical error, that she had been looking into options for the future of the property because she was worried about you managing it alone when he was gone. I set my cup down very carefully. He did not believe her, I said. No, Patricia said. He did not. She handed me an envelope then, a proper one, sealed, with my name on the front in Gerald's handwriting, the same careful letters I had watched sign birthday cards and report cards and Christmas tags for 38 years. I did not open it there. I held it against my chest the whole drive back to Orangeville, both hands on the wheel, the envelope pressed between my coat and my ribs. I did not open it until I was sitting in the driveway of my own house, engine off, with the October fields golden on both sides. Dorothy, if Patricia gave this to you, then I did not get the chance to tell you myself. I am sorry for that. I am sorry for the worry this will cause. You deserve better than to carry this, but I could not leave without making sure you were protected. The backfield is not only ours. There is a second deed registered against a portion of it going back 20 years, held under a numbered company. I traced the company. It belongs to Darren. He has been paying the carrying costs quietly, waiting. Margaret knows. They have been waiting for me to die. The words on the page were so calm, the handwriting so even. Gerald had always written that way, as if the steadiness of the letters could control the weight of what they carried. I have put documents with Henderson's firm, Robert Henderson, my old colleague in Guelph. He is holding a sealed file in your name to be opened at your request. Do not go to anyone else first, not a local solicitor, not anyone Margaret might know, and Dorothy, do not sign anything. Whatever they bring you in the coming months, do not sign. I sat in that driveway until the sun went down. Margaret called the next morning, as she did most mornings. She had been calling every day since the funeral, which I had interpreted as grief and love, and the particular guilt of a child who did not call often enough when the parent was well. Now I listened to her voice differently, not with suspicion exactly, but with attention I had not paid before. "How are you sleeping?" she asked. "Well enough," I said. Darren was thinking he could come by this weekend and have a look at the property, just to assess what needs winterizing. You really should not be managing all of that alone. I managed it last winter, I said pleasantly. A small pause. Dad was here last winter, Mom. I know, I said. I meant I managed the outdoor things myself. Another pause, shorter. Of course. We just want to help. I told her that was very kind and that I would let her know about the weekend. And I got off the phone and stood in the kitchen for a long moment with my hand still resting on the receiver. 20 years. Darren had been carrying a registered interest in a portion of my land for 20 years. We had celebrated their engagement in this house. I had taught Margaret to make pie crust at the counter 4 feet away. 20 years of Sunday dinners and Christmases and grandchildren's birthdays, and underneath all of it, this. I drove to Guelph the following morning. Robert Henderson was in his 70s, semi-retired, with the careful manner of a man who has spent his career being trusted with difficult things. He shook my hand and did not offer condolences, which I appreciated. He had been expecting me. Gerald came to see me in September, he said, settling behind his desk. He was thorough, as he always was. He left clear instructions. The file contained a title search, a corporate registry printout tracing the numbered company to Darren's name, correspondence between Gerald and a real estate litigation lawyer in Toronto, and a 2-page summary, in Gerald's own words, documenting everything he had found and when he had found it. The numbered company had been registered 22 years ago, 3 years after our wedding, before Margaret and Darren were married. Darren had filed it himself. The interest was registered against a 1-2 acre portion of the back field under an agreement Gerald's own father had apparently signed without fully understanding decades earlier. Gerald had found no record that his father received any payment. The agreement had been buried in a transaction involving a neighboring property sale and appears to have been inserted without the elder man's informed knowledge. "Is it enforceable?" I asked. Henderson folded his hands. "That is what the Toronto litigation firm is examining. Gerald believed it could be challenged, strongly. The manner in which it was registered has significant problems. But it would take time, and it would need to be initiated before any development application moved forward." "Margaret and Darren filed a development application," I said. Gerald told me. "He believed they filed it to establish a record of use and intent before they approached you about selling. Once you were grieving, alone, and they came to you with an offer that appeared generous, he thought you might sign without understanding what you were actually giving away." I looked out the window at the parking lot. A woman was struggling to fold a stroller by her car. A normal Wednesday morning in Guelph. "What do?" I said. "You retain the Toronto firm," Henderson said. "Today, if possible, Gerald already paid the initial retainer. He thought of that too." I pressed my hand over my mouth for a moment. Then I composed myself. "He always thought ahead," I said. "Yes," Henderson said quietly. "He was a very thorough man." On the drive home, I passed 3 of those new subdivision signs, the ones with the artist renderings of houses that have not been built yet, cheerful and inevitable looking. The back field behind my house was not large by any measure, but in this part of Ontario, with development pressure moving steadily north from the city, even 1.2 acres could be worth considerably more than it looked. Gerald had known that. Darren had known it for 22 years. I thought about Darren at our Christmas table. I thought about the way he always refilled my glass without being asked, the small attentions that had made me think of him as considerate. I thought about how he had walked my property in the dark the evening of the funeral reception, hands in his pockets, looking at nothing in particular. He had been looking at the field. Margaret called again on Thursday. Her voice was warmer than usual, the deliberate warmth I now recognized as rehearsed. "Darren and I have been talking," she said. "We think it might be a good time to discuss the property, the backfield especially. We have some thoughts on how you could access its value without all the upkeep." "I appreciate that," I said. "Let's plan a time to sit down. This weekend? Next week would be better. I have some things to attend to first." A brief pause. "Of course. Are you doing all right, Mom?" "I am managing," I said, and meant it entirely differently than she understood. I signed the retainer with the Toronto firm the next day. The lawyer I spoke with, a careful woman named Sonia Bott, told me to document every conversation, to delay any in-person meetings with Margaret and Darren without appearing to avoid them, and above all, to sign nothing. "Your husband built a strong foundation here," she told me. "He anticipated almost every move they might make." "He was a surveyor," I said. "He understood land and what people were willing to do for it." "How are you holding up?" she asked, and the question was practical, not performative. "I am angry," I said, "but I am clear." "Good," she said. "Clear is exactly what we need." The following week arrived, and with it, Margaret and Darren. They came on a Tuesday evening, which I thought was deliberate midweek, when I was supposed to be tired and unguarded. Darren carried a folder. Margaret carried a bottle of wine. We sat in the living room because I did not want them in Gerald's kitchen. The proposal was presented as a favor to me. Darren laid it out efficiently, his hands moving over the papers like a man who had rehearsed this conversation many times. The backfield had potential, he explained. There was interest from a developer he knew. Nothing formal yet, just conversations. If I were willing to sever the 1.2 acres, They could facilitate the transaction and ensure I received fair market value. Given the costs of maintaining the property alone, the proceeds could fund comfortable living for many years. A condo in town, perhaps. Something manageable. Margaret watched my face while Darren talked. "You would not have to worry about winters out here," she said softly. "We worry about you." I looked at the folder on my coffee table. I thought about the registered interest, the numbered company, the application filed while Gerald was still alive and frightened. "How long have you been thinking about this?" I asked. Darren smiled. "We have been concerned for some time. About the field specifically," I said. Something shifted in his expression, so briefly I almost missed it. "About the whole situation," he said smoothly. I folded my hands in my lap. "I need time to review anything before I respond," I said. "I hope you can understand that." Margaret leaned forward. "Mom, this is family. You do not need a lawyer for family." "I think I should take my time," I said pleasantly. Darren placed the folder on the table and slid it toward me. "Nothing to sign tonight. Just read it through. We can talk more this week." After they left, I stood at the window and watched their headlights move down the long gravel drive and disappear onto the road. The back field was a dark shape against the sky. The maple trees along the eastern edge were bare now, November having arrived while I was not paying attention. Gerald had walked that field every spring to look for frost-heave damage to the fence post line. He had walked it every fall to clear the drainage ditch that ran along the south edge. He had walked it in the evenings sometimes for no reason I could identify, just to be on the land that had been in his family for 3 generations. He had not died defending it. He had died of cardiac arrest, sudden and without warning, in the early morning in April. The doctor had said there was nothing anyone could have done. I had believed that. I still believed that. But he had been living with this knowledge, this particular fear, and he had carried it alone because he wanted to protect me. And now he was gone, and I was the one standing at the window, and the field was still there, and so was I. Sonia called 2 days later. Her voice was measured, which I had learned meant she had news that required steadiness. "We have found something in the original registration that significantly weakens their position," she said. "The agreement Gerald's father signed did not include a proper legal description of the specific parcel. The boundary references are ambiguous enough that a court could find the interest unenforceable, particularly given the lack of any documented consideration to the original party." "They did not pay him," I said. "Gerald's father. We cannot find any evidence they did." "Your husband documented that thoroughly." He also kept notes on conversations with his father before the man passed away, in which his father described the transaction as an agreement to look at options, not a transfer of interest. Gerald wrote it all down. My eyes filled without warning. I pressed my fingers to them briefly. "He documented those conversations," I said. "He documented everything," Sonia said. "He was building a case. I think he knew he might not live to see it through." I did not say anything for a moment. "What do we do now?" I said. "We have filed an application to challenge the registration. That means the development application cannot proceed until this is resolved. Darren's legal counsel will receive notice within the week. At that point, your daughter and son-in-law will understand that their position is considerably weaker than they believed, and they will have to decide how they want to proceed. Will they fight it? That depends on how much they are willing to spend and how much they believe they can win. Given what Gerald documented, I think there is a strong argument they will not want this to go to a public hearing." I sat with that for a moment. "And if they do fight it?" "Then we fight it," Sonia said simply. "But Dorothy, you should know that Gerald did not just leave you documentation. He left you a very good case." The notice reached Darren's solicitor on a Thursday. Margaret called me on Friday morning and her voice was different. The careful warmth was gone, replaced by something thinner and more careful. "We received some paperwork," she said. "Yes," I said. "Mom." A pause. You did not tell us you had spoken to a lawyer. You did not tell me about the numbered company, I said. Silence. That is complicated, she said finally. That goes back years. That was before we were even married, before you and Dad were settled here. Darren was just protecting an investment. In land that belonged to your father's family, I said. It is not that simple. Her voice sharpened briefly, then softened again. We should talk about this in person. There has been a misunderstanding. We can sort this out without lawyers. I think the lawyers should sort it out, I said. Mom. Her voice broke then, just slightly. I had heard that break before, at 16, at 20, at various moments across her life when she understood that a door had closed. I did not want it to be like this. I thought about what I wanted to say. I thought about Gerald sitting with Patricia in the fall, frightened, trying to build a protection around me before he ran out of time. I thought about Darren walking the field in the dark the night of the funeral. Neither did I said. And that was entirely true. The process took most of the winter. There were legal filings and counter-filings, and a mediation session in January that I attended with Sonia, and which ended with Darren's lawyer requesting more time. Margaret sent me emails that oscillated between apology and justification, and something that occasionally resembled genuine remorse. I answered them briefly and without anger, because anger would have exhausted me and I had other things to do with my energy. In February, Darren's challenge was withdrawn. The registered interest was removed from title. The development application lapsed. Sonia called to tell me, and her voice carried the particular satisfaction of someone who does not often let it show. It is over? I asked. The legal portion, yes. The rest is yours to navigate. I stood at the kitchen window looking at the back field. Snow had covered the drainage ditch and softened the fence post line and made the maple trees look like something from a calendar. Gerald had always loved the field in February. He said the snow made the property look larger. Patricia called that evening. She had been calling every few weeks through the winter. Careful calls, checking in without pressing. I heard it was resolved, she said. How did you hear? Small family, she said dryly. I laughed, which surprised me. I had not laughed in some time. Thank you, I said. For the note. For keeping what he left you. For waiting until it was the right time. He made me promise, she said. He said, you would know what to do with it. He always had more confidence in me than I had in myself, I said. That is because he knew you, Patricia said. Spring came the way it always does in this part of Ontario, reluctantly at first, and then all at once. I had the drainage ditch cleared in April by a young man from town who charged a fair price and did not ask personal questions. I walked the back field on the first warm Saturday, the ground soft beneath my boots, the maples beginning to bud along the eastern edge. I did not forgive Margaret easily or quickly. Forgiveness, I have come to understand, is not something you decide once. It is something you decide again and again, on mornings when the grief sits differently than it did the day before. I spoke to her in April for the first time since January. The conversation was careful and unsatisfying and necessary. I did not forgive Darren yet. Perhaps I will. I am not certain it matters to him either way. What I found instead of forgiveness, at least at first, was clarity. Clarity about what the land meant to me and why. Clarity about the difference between people who loved me and people who had mistaken me for someone who could be managed. Clarity about the fact that Gerald had seen all of this coming and had not left me unprotected. He had hired a lawyer I did not know. He had documented conversations with his father. He had filed papers in a town 30 minutes away with a colleague he trusted. He had done all of it quietly, without alarming me, without changing the way he poured his coffee in the morning or called to say he was on his way home. He had known he might not have enough time, and he had used the time he had. I think about that often now. I think about the kind of love that looks not like declarations, but like preparation, like organizing your files so that the woman you have been married to for 38 years will be able to find what she needs after you are gone. The backfield is still mine. The maple trees came fully into leaf in May, and by June they cast shade halfway across the north edge of the field in the late afternoon, the way Gerald always said they would once they matured. He had planted 2 of those trees himself, decades ago, saplings from a nursery north of town. He was patient about things like that. He could invest in something he would not see fully grown without it troubling him. I walk the field most evenings now, not because I need to, but because it is mine and I know it, and knowing the difference between what is yours and what people would take from you is not something you should ever take for granted. I am 64 years old. I live alone in a house that is too large for one person and exactly right for the life I have built in it. I have learned that grief does not arrive only when someone dies. Sometimes it arrives when you discover who they were when you were not watching, and sometimes what you find there, in that private and quiet place, is something worth more than you expected. Gerald was not a man who said a great deal. He did not make speeches or write long letters. The note he left me was 9 sentences, but he understood the land, and he understood what people were willing to do for it, and he understood me well enough to know that if I had the truth, I would know what to do with it. He was right about that. He was right about most things. The most dangerous losses are not the ones that come all at once, but the ones that come quietly, in the language of concern and care and family obligation, from people who have already decided what they want before they ever ask you a question. Protect what is yours, not out of greed, but out of respect for the ones who built it before you and trusted you to hold it. And never mistake gentleness for weakness. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is wait until they are ready and then refuse to let go.